From artificial intelligence to blockchain and even decentralized finance, emerging technologies are no longer buzzwords. They are tools that, if harnessed correctly, could help Africa solve some of its biggest challenges, whether it's access to healthcare, education, or inclusive economic opportunities. But the question is, how do we move from potential to progress? And how do we ensure that these tools are shaped by African realities, African innovation, and even African leadership? Joining me on the program this week is someone right at the heart of this conversation, James Sarichera, co-founder of Afica.info. Let's dive in.
When I was a child in Morocco, I remember a message that echoed from classrooms, newspapers, and evening broadcasts. It wasn't shouted, but it was everywhere. Africa is behind in technology, behind in development, always running to catch up. That message wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous. It buried the real story, one that few were willing to tell. Africa wasn't behind, it was building, quietly, resiliently, brilliantly. Because while the world turned its gaze to Silicon Valley and Wall Street, something remarkable was happening on the streets of Lagos, Nairobi, Kigali, and Cairo. Not just stories of survival or foreign aid, but stories of invention, bold thinking, and homegrown solutions to problems that Silicon Valley wouldn't even know how to describe. When people hear the term tech innovation, they picture young men in hoodies, AirPods in their ears, tapping code on MacBooks in a San Francisco cafe. What they don't picture, what's been left out of the narrative for far too long, is the Nigerian engineer designing billion-dollar payment platforms, the Kenyan developer deploying drones to deliver blood to remote villages, the Rwandan startup harnessing solar energy for entire communities. They don't picture Africa, but they should. In fact, 2/3 of all mobile money transactions on Earth now happen in sub-Saharan Africa. Let that sink in. The region the world loves to paint as poor and in need of rescue is leading a global revolution in digital finance. While banks in Europe and the US were still bogged down with bureaucracy and legacy systems, African innovators were building lean, scalable, mobile-first financial tools designed for real people with real challenges. But before we dive deeper into Africa's Silicon Valleys, and yes, there are many, we need to talk about something less visible, but just as important: culture. Because statistics alone don't explain how hard it is to become an innovator when your environment doesn't encourage risk, when failure isn't seen as a lesson but a stain. Years ago, I scraped together savings from freelance jobs to open a small juice bar. I still remember the confusion in my mother's eyes. To her, this wasn't innovation, it was foolishness. After all the schooling, all the sacrifices, all the opportunities I'd turned down for real jobs, I was making juice? Years later, when I built a fast-growing company in the UK, made it to Forbes and BBC, she still told the neighbors I worked a nice office job. That's the truth about entrepreneurship in much of Africa. It's not just a business risk, it's a cultural risk. You're not just gambling your money, you're gambling your family's pride. Yet in spite of this, Africa's tech ecosystems are not only growing, they're thriving. And they're doing it in ways that are distinctly African. Africa isn't a country. It's a continent with over 50 nations, 1.4 billion people, and more diversity than most of the world combined. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that it's home to multiple innovation hotspots, each one carving out its own domain. In Lagos, Nigeria, Yaba district is known as Yabakan Valley, the continent's fintech nerve center. It's home to Flutterwave, a company now valued at $3 billion, providing payment infrastructure not only across Africa but also globally. In Nairobi, Kenya, they call it Silicon Savannah. This is the birthplace of M-Pesa, the text-based mobile money system that revolutionized finance in East Africa. At a time when most Kenyans didn't have access to bank accounts, they could send and receive money by SMS. No apps, no internet required, just your phone. In Rwanda's capital, Kigali, drones are delivering medical supplies to rural clinics. In Botswana, the government is constructing a $60 million tech park from scratch, offering free broadband to more than 100 startups. In Cairo, AI and e-commerce startups are growing fast, turning Egypt into a magnet for venture capital. In South Africa, fintech meets traditional finance with strong infrastructure backing e-commerce, insurtech, and logistics platforms. These aren't just copycats of Western models. These are problem solvers. These are platforms, tools, and systems built for the African context. Systems that work even when electricity doesn't. Systems that don't assume everyone has a credit score or a laptop or a stable internet connection. Systems designed for people living in reality, not theory. And this might be the continent's greatest advantage. Africa isn't weighed down by outdated infrastructure. Where there were no landlines, people went straight to mobile phones. Where there were no bank branches, people moved directly to mobile wallets. No legacy systems means no legacy constraints. It's like jumping over a crumbling bridge instead of trying to fix it while crossing. When M-Pesa launched in 2007, it wasn't just another product, it was a lifeline. With just a basic phone, you could transfer money, pay bills, and even save. Within a decade, mobile money was the primary financial service for over 2/3 of Kenyan adults. Not because it mimicked Western banking, but because it didn't. This is what makes African innovation different. It's born out of necessity. It's not solving convenience problems, it's solving life problems. But let's not paint this as a perfect picture. Africa's challenges are real. In 2023, only about 37% of the continent had internet access. Frequent power cuts mean businesses often run on expensive backup generators. In Nigeria, some startups lose up to 20% of revenue just keeping the lights on. Imagine trying to pitch to a global investor at 10 a.m., then rushing to buy diesel for your generator by noon. That's the daily grind for many African founders. And yet they keep building. They build in spite of broken systems, not because of working ones. And that resilience, that creativity under pressure is forging a different kind of tech culture, one that's practical, focused, and human-centered. In the US, startups compete to shave seconds off grocery deliveries. In Africa, startups compete to save lives. That's not hyperbole. In countries like Rwanda and Ghana, drones are now used to deliver blood, vaccines, and critical medical supplies to areas unreachable by road, especially during flooding. That's not convenience. That's survival. These aren't just nice ideas, these are blueprints. Models that are already being studied and adopted elsewhere. In a world increasingly shaped by crisis, from pandemics to climate change, the innovations born in Africa's constraints may become the solutions the rest of the world desperately needs. If there's one force quietly reshaping the African tech ecosystem, it's not just the internet or smartphones. It's people. Specifically, it's the people who left and then chose to come back. They call it the diaspora, Africans who studied, worked, or built careers abroad and are now returning home, not just with savings in their bank accounts, but with something far more valuable. Knowledge, networks, and hard-earned experience from some of the most competitive tech and business environments in the world. It's easy to underestimate what this means until you see it up close. Take Olugbenga Agboola, better known as GB, the co-founder of Flutterwave, one of Africa's biggest fintech success stories. Before launching the company that now powers payments across more than 30 African countries, GB worked at global giants like PayPal, Google, and Standard Bank. He didn't just learn coding or management, he learned how the global financial system worked from the inside, and then used that insight to build something better for Nigeria and beyond. Or take the founders of Andela, who understood the gap between global demand for tech talent and the untapped potential sitting in African cities. They didn't just create a company, they created a bridge, one that connected African developers to companies in Silicon Valley, London, and Berlin. Today, Andela's alumni work everywhere from Meta to Microsoft. Then there's the rise of e-commerce. Jumia and Konga, two of the continent's biggest online marketplaces, were both co-founded by Nigerians with overseas experience. They understood that Africa's retail systems couldn't be simply copied from Amazon or Alibaba. They had to be rebuilt for a context where cash on delivery was the norm, mobile was king, and logistics required creativity over scale. This brain gain is rewriting the narrative. For decades, the fear was that Africa's best and brightest were lost to Europe, North America, or Asia, a one-way ticket out. But now, many of those who left are coming back with a new mindset. Build here, grow here, succeed here. And they're not alone. The shift in momentum has attracted global attention and global capital. In 2022, African startups raised over $6.5 billion in venture capital, more than they'd ever raised before. That same year, something symbolic happened. SoftBank, one of the world's largest technology investors, made its first major African bet, $400 million into Nigeria's OPay, a mobile money and fintech platform. It wasn't just about the money, it was a signal that Africa was no longer seen as a place for charity or pilot projects. It was a market, one worth betting big on. By 2023, the continent had gone from virtually no unicorns, startups valued over $1 billion, to at least 6, and more are emerging every year. But look closer, and a pattern emerges, one that's both inspiring and concerning. Nearly 70% of all startup investment in Africa goes to one sector, Fintech. From mobile wallets to payment gateways, digital lending to insurance tech, financial innovation is clearly the continent's strongest play. And for good reason. Access to finance unlocks everything, from small businesses to healthcare, education to agriculture. In countries where bank branches are rare and credit cards even rarer, Fintech isn't just disrupting old systems, it's creating entirely new ones. Still, this heavy focus on Fintech comes at a cost. Other vital sectors, health tech, clean energy, education, often struggle to attract the same level of capital, even though they arguably address more urgent needs. And the funding is concentrated geographically too. In 2023, just 4 countries dominated. Kenya raised $800 million, Egypt secured $640 million, South Africa brought in $600 million, Nigeria attracted $410 million. Together, these 4 countries received nearly 90% of all startup funding on the continent. That leaves dozens of other nations, with just as much ambition, talent, and need, fighting over the remaining scraps. This imbalance creates a kind of bottleneck. The cities of Nairobi, Lagos, Cairo, and Cape Town become magnets for talent, for capital, for opportunity, while rural areas and smaller countries are left behind, not for lack of ideas, but for lack of access. It also raises a deeper question. Where is the money coming from, and what strings are attached? So far, much of Africa's tech boom has been fueled by foreign investors, from the US, Europe, China, and increasingly the Gulf states. Chinese firms backed M-Pesa's expansion in Kenya and have made plays in logistics and e-commerce across the region. American giants like Sequoia Capital and Y Combinator are active in the continent's biggest deals. Local venture capital is growing, but it's still small compared to outside players. And that matters, because where funding comes from often shapes the direction of innovation. Foreign investors bring money, yes, but also expectations. Often those expectations are shaped by exit strategies, profit timelines, or user metrics that don't always align with African realities. There's a world of difference between building a product that transforms life in a Ghanaian village and building one that pleases a boardroom in Palo Alto. This doesn't mean Africa should reject outside capital, but it does mean African entrepreneurs, governments, and institutions need to think carefully about ownership, about who controls the companies shaping Africa's digital future, and whose interests they ultimately serve. Because without that awareness, it's easy to become just another consumer market, a place where the technology is used, but the power stays elsewhere. That's why strong local investment ecosystems are essential, not just for pride, but for sustainability. When local investors back local companies, the wins stay closer to home. The decisions are more likely to reflect real needs, not just investor dashboards. Still, money is only one piece of the puzzle. Government policy plays an equally critical role, sometimes as a catalyst, sometimes as a barrier. Take Kenya, for example. M-Pesa's success wasn't just technical. It happened because regulators took a hands-off approach in the early days. They gave the platform space to grow, to be tested, and to prove its value before they stepped in with rules. That one decision unlocked a movement. Today, Kenya is often used as a global case study in financial inclusion, not because they followed the rules, but because they made space to rewrite them. Rwanda is following a similar path. Known for its efficient bureaucracy and strong public-private partnerships, it has built one of the most supportive environments for innovation in Africa. With innovation funds, startup hubs, and regulatory sandboxes, Rwanda encourages experimentation instead of punishing it. But not every country has taken this route. In 2021, Nigeria, one of Africa's largest fintech markets, suddenly banned cryptocurrency transactions through banks. The decision blindsided startups, wiped out user savings, and sent shockwaves through the investment community. In 2017, Cameroon shut down internet access in its English-speaking regions for 3 months during political unrest. The move devastated local tech businesses and sent a chilling message to entrepreneurs. The internet, your lifeline, could be cut without warning. These choices matter. Innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It needs infrastructure, yes. But but it also needs policy that protects rather than punishes experimentation. What's clear is that Africa's tech scene is not just surviving, it's expanding, it's diversifying, and it's being shaped by more than just market forces. It's being shaped by people, values, and vision. Coming up in Part 3, we'll look at the innovations born in Africa that are now influencing the rest of the world, and why they might be the key to solving global problems in the years ahead.
As the global tech landscape continues to evolve at a rapid pace, Nigeria and the rest of the continent are poised to harness the power of frontier technologies to drive economic growth, improve efficiency, and create new opportunities. From artificial intelligence and agentic AI to application-specific semiconductors and quantum technologies, the possibilities for innovation and disruption are vast. But what does this mean for Africa? And how can businesses, governments, and individuals on the continent capitalize on these trends? Well, joining me for more on this, I have right here with me Adio. I hope I got that correctly. I have right here with me Adio, yes.
For decades, the global narrative painted Africa as a recipient of innovation, never the source. But that idea is collapsing fast, because many of the technologies shaping our future are already being designed, tested, and perfected on African soil. Take mobile money. When Kenya launched M-Pesa in 2007, the world saw it as a clever local fix, a way to send money across long distances without banks. But what started as a solution for rural communities quickly became a global model. Today, digital finance systems inspired by M-Pesa operate across Asia, Latin America, and even underserved parts of Europe. Right now, much of Africa's tech boom is fueled by foreign capital. US, European, Chinese, and Gulf investors have brought in billions. And while this funding has accelerated growth, it also comes with strings attached. Decisions about direction, growth, and even product design are sometimes made in boardrooms thousands of kilometers from the communities these products serve. If the continent's digital future is built on platforms owned elsewhere, Africa risks becoming just another consumer market, a place where innovation happens locally, but the profits and control are exported. That's why local investment is crucial. Banks, pension funds, private equity firms, and even successful entrepreneurs must see African startups as worthy of serious backing. Ownership means decision-making power. It determines where profits are reinvested, which markets are prioritized, and whose needs come first. Ownership also ties directly to education and infrastructure, two of Africa's most urgent needs. By 2050, Africa will have the largest workforce in the world. But talent without preparation is wasted potential. This isn't just about producing more graduates. It's about training more coders, engineers, product designers, and problem solvers. It's about shifting from theory-heavy education to hands-on, skills-based learning. And it's about ensuring the barriers outside the classroom, poor connectivity, unreliable electricity, and lack of resources, are removed. Infrastructure is equally vital. Startups can't scale if they're losing revenue to power outages, or if it's cheaper to import data from Europe than to host it locally. Affordable internet, reliable energy, and better logistics are not luxuries. They are the foundations of sustainable innovation. There's also the issue of geography. Most investment and infrastructure are concentrated in a few urban hubs, Lagos, Nairobi, Cairo, Cape Town, while rural areas are left behind. And yet, it's those rural communities where technology could be most transformative. Off-grid solar, mobile health clinics, and remote learning tools aren't optional there. They're essential. Finally, there's the cultural factor. In Silicon Valley, failure is a badge of honor. In Africa, failure often carries a social cost that can follow you for years. Yet entrepreneurs keep building, despite the risk, because the drive to solve real problems outweighs the fear of what the neighbors might say. Africa's innovation story is not a smooth one. It's messy, it's uneven, but it's real, and it's happening now. The world is waking up to the fact that the future may depend on the kind of problem-solving Africa has already mastered. Innovation born from necessity, built under constraint, and designed for impact. In a century where climate change, inequality, and resource scarcity will define global priorities, Africa's approach may be the blueprint for resilience everywhere. The challenge, and the opportunity, is to ensure that Africa doesn't just participate in that future, but owns it. What do you think? Could Africa's approach to tech, grounded in necessity, resilience, and creativity, be the model the world needs right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Support this work by liking the video and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss our future deep dives into stories that matter.